your brain develops to a certain point and then something clicks on. And it seems like gender is another one of these things where you get to bam 5 years of age and it clicks on.
Hello everyone, welcome to another Street Epistemology Zoom conversation. Today I've got Kiwi. How's it going, Kiwi?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you so much. Yeah, thanks for coming on here and doing the Zoom conversation thing. And where did you see this thing as available? On the Discord, is that right?
Yeah, I was on the Discord. So I saw you, pop up and say that you wanted to talk about a couple of the subjects that we usually discuss on the Discord in the content area. So when you pop that up, I'm always talking about gender stuff on there. So I was like, all right, let's go ahead and talk to Reed.
I pop in that content warning text channel every now and then, and it's usually lives up to the name, I think, at least in terms of, what people are talking about and the general tone in there. I can't do text with stuff like that. It's just, I love talking about all the stuff in there, but I can't do text. I much prefer video and, face-to-face conversations ideally, but this Zoom is fine. So what's your background with street epistemology in general? I know you've talked with Dolly before. Yeah, what's the background?
Yeah, so my background is probably, it's not that broad, honestly, when it comes to street epistemology. So I watched Anthony for a good, probably like 2 years and I didn't even know what Discord was until probably about a year ago. And then, I decided, because I always like talking about gender issues and that kind of thing. And I thought, you know what, this is something that I don't see that's being talked about with street epistemology using this method. I understood the method and thought it was pretty cool. So I wanted to see if anybody else was either talking about that subject or similar subjects, or I even like talking about, religion and those types of things, which you see a lot of in street epistemology. So I'm familiar with it. I don't really do the interviews as much, but I interlocate a lot. Interlocute, whatever that is,
Whatever that is.
Yeah, whatever that word is.
So cool. You just mainly hang out on the SE Discord and watch some videos every now and then. And yeah, cool. Yeah, and I've been wanting to talk about these topics, as well, like the gender identity and all this stuff around, the culture war issues of, all this stuff of gender and trans rights, and that's just one part of this whole big culture war mess. And I rarely see, civil conversations about these topics. And it's hard to know even what people are talking about because they're always talking past each other. They're never getting any clarity on what they mean. And I think street epistemology would be a great way to talk with people about these things. And I try to do that out in public. I put some of those topics on my board, and sometimes I talk with people, but then it's very surface level, and I don't really get anyone who really knows, in depth, all that goes into these ideas, because they have a lot to them, I think.
Yeah. And I'll say that when it comes to any of the other subjects that you had, asked about, aside from gender, I'm not as knowledgeable about those. But of course, so I'm a trans woman, so I already, know a lot about gender. I've been out to a lot of people for the past 14 years. So it's been a while, and I've watched it for a good long time. I've watched the way that we talk about gender today is very different compared, in my opinion. I think it's very different compared to how we've talked about it years ago. And so I've been able to watch it, is my point, for the longest time. And but when it comes to the cultural pieces of it, I might not be as good of a person to talk to, because I'm not a big believer in the cultural aspects so much. But we can absolutely kind of touch on those. So.
Cool. Yeah, sure. So it's probably around 2007 you've been keeping track of all of this, and I'm sure over the last decade, yeah, lots has happened.
Yeah.
So, and you yourself are a trans woman. That's cool.
Mhm.
Sweet. Appreciate it. Cool. Pretty cool. Sweet. And yeah, sure. Would love to talk to people about these things, from people who actually believe them and people who actually are deeply identified with whatever. And this is going to be a perfect
Yeah.
way to do that. Love it. So you brought a few claims in the Calendly link thing. Like, gender identity seems to exist. It's morally correct to use someone's preferred pronouns, and transgender adolescents should have access to puberty blockers and or cross-sex hormones. Those are a few potential claims to talk about.
Yeah.
Anything else that we should put on this list to consider?
I think that those are a good three beliefs that I hold pretty dearly, that, we can kind of talk about those. The reason why I picked those couple is because I'm not sure how many times, if you've had the conversation of gender identity seems to be a thing. If you've had that conversation maybe 10 times already, then I figured, all right, well, here's some other ones that we can look into. So really, I guess, is there one of those three that you're, more interested in than the others, or?
I think I haven't gotten into a deep conversation about gender identity that I'd like to go through, and then maybe the transgender adolescents and the puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones. That sounds like a spicy one to talk about. That people might be interested to watch. That's a fun one. Well, it's serious though as well. And okay, so we can talk about gender identity seems to exist, and I've got various ways to kind of map out stuff and keep track of what we're meaning. So I'm going to try this by sharing my screen. See, I'm thinking of using like this Jamboard thing to like talk about the claim and the definitions for the various, like even different definitions for words, and then pick which definition is best to use for the claim.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into arguments for and against, or just map out the argument for this claim with Kialo.
Okay.
Does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds fine. Can I ask, is it okay if, just because I'm not great at grasping like definitions, and I don't want to just go, gender is a social construct, because that's like the, regurgitated line for it. But is it okay if I like look up these definitions just to kind of help me? So I have ADHD and this kind of thing. So it's like,
That's perfectly fine.
It's harder for me to like keep track of those types of things.
Yeah.
How should we start with your I guess your vision board here?
Yeah. Is this the best way to phrase the claim? Gender identity seems to exist, or just exists, or why seems?
Yeah. Well, I specifically, I use the word seems to exist because I don't think that there is my confidence is not 100% in it, so that's why I use the word seems. It seems to me like, yes, gender identity is a thing. I could be wrong about that. So.
Okay. So yeah, on Kialo, there's a way to rate the claim, the thesis, whatever we're talking about. So if like 0 is false, 1 is improbable, 2 is plausible, 3 is probable, and 4 is true, where would you put your rating on this claim? Gender identity seems to exist.
I guess I would put it at true. It's just that when I say that something's true, if there is like additional research that could kind of kick it out, I'm saying it's true, but it's not 100%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, true, but not 100%. I also have confidence scale. We could do this as well.
Yeah. Confidence scale. I'd say like if you could put me at like a 95 for gender identity.
95, about there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. Cool. All right, now let's clarify some terms with this claim, because I'm sure people will maybe not understand what gender identity is and even gender itself. So let's just get a bunch of like just all definitions for gender and then pick the one that's right for this claim.
Right.
Yeah.
I guess maybe instead of just saying the definition, can we start with gender identity actually instead of gender?
Sure.
Does that work? Gender identity is a sense of one's belonging to I guess you could say a sexual group. So either male or female as a sexual group. And yeah, I guess you could just end it there. Just put a period on that.
Okay. And like, I'm trying to be very particular here.
Sure.
And that sexual group is male and female?
So it would it would be male or female. You could also really add anything in between. It's an identification thing at that point also. So sexual group, male, female, and I guess you could say male, female, and other in between, non-binary, that kind of thing.
Like that. Sexual group is male and female or other non-binary. And the main definition for gender identity is a sense of one's belonging to a sexual group, either the male and female or non-binary. And there's others besides. There's just other, and one example of other is non-binary.
Yeah, for easy use in the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll just stick to those.
Yep.
All right. Are there any other definitions you've heard people give for this that may be wrong, but just other definitions people have said what gender identity is or may be?
I guess not ones that aren't like extremely circular. And what I mean by that is, you say gender identity, and then if you use the word gender and identity in there again, it's not very useful to me.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see if there's an easy one that I can point to. Google's saying an individual personal sense of having a particular gender. I don't really like that one because it's saying gender identity. It's a sense of having a gender.
A sense of having
using the word again. Yeah, an individual's personal sense of having a particular gender. An individual's personal sense of having a particular gender.
Okay. An individual's personal sense of having a particular gender, which uses the word gender in it, which is not exactly the same thing as gender identity. It's just identifying with that gender. Yeah. Okay. Any other potential definitions for gender identity? And which one would, well, I'll put this little check mark thing next to the one we're going to go with.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers it for gender identity.
Okay. And we'll get to sex in a second, I guess. So gender, what are some of the popular definitions or usages of gender? I guess like words don't have like one definition.
Yeah.
It's like different usages and which is the ones we should use.
So I guess gender would be, I guess I could also say that that's pretty much a sexual group, but it's more like I feel like it's instinct, like based off. So the line is always it's a cultural construct or it's a social construct, right? So you could use that one as one of them. It's a social construct.
Yeah, that's one, yeah.
But then, like the meaning of that is there are these sexual groups, and there are sexes that or people who share very similar characteristics to one another, and the groups that they form, that social group, that's gender. Um, I don't know if you can distill that for me.
Yeah. It's a social construct, and it's about a social group and the properties of a social group.
Right. Yeah. Properties is a good word for it, maybe.
Of a social group.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the social construct in a social group.
Right.
All right.
And of course we're talking about it as a social group, but it's based off of sexual characteristics. So maybe if you want to add that social group based off of shared sex characteristics.
Shared sex characteristics.
Mm-hmm. I think this is really helpful, actually. I'm glad that you're doing this.
Cool.
Um,
What are sex characteristics?
right. So sex characteristics, these are going to be all sorts of things. These are going to be gametes. These are going to be chromosomes. These are going to be genital shapes. These are going to be down to hormones, and there are primary sexual characteristics and there are secondary sexual characteristics. So there's a lot of them. So I guess that's sex characteristics is more of like something that you can list.
Right. There are primary and secondary ones.
Mm-hmm.
Some examples are genital shapes, chromosomes. Let's define primary and secondary. Which ones go under which category? Do gametes go under primary? Or
so gametes and chromosomes and genital shapes are all primary.
Primary.
Mm-hmm. And then secondaries are more the results of those gametes, genital shapes, and chromosomes. So that would be anything that is developed by hormones. So that would be like presence or absence of breasts, or presence or absence of particular body hair, presence or absence of, or like shape of your masseters, or shape of
what?
Your what's that?
Shape of what? Masseters?
I think they're called the masseters. It's this your jaw basically.
Oh, the jaw.
Yeah, shape of like jaw, and your forehead, and the sound of your voice. Those are all things that are affected by hormones themselves.
This is great. Sound of voice. Mm-hmm. These are the secondary ones. All right. I'm sure we can go on to get more, but that's good. Good sampling there. Okay, so now that came up. Sex characteristics came up in this definition of gender: the properties of a social group based on shared sex characteristics, of which there are two types: primary and secondary. And like, you could have a bunch of Venn diagrams of like people with certain primary characteristics, have some but not all, and it also overlaps with some secondary characteristics, some but not all. So these are just a variety of like Venn diagram groups and categories.
Yes, absolutely.
And each category in that Venn diagram is its own potentially gender? Or no?
It could be. So gender seems like such a nebulous thing to me, where I don't want to really like specify it to that and say like each. So like take this as an example. Say that there is a cisgender male. So that is cisgender, of course, is somebody that is not trans, right? So this person is assigned male at birth. They identify as a male, and they have male pattern gametes. They have male genital shape. They have XY chromosomes, very just, we could categorize this person as male in many, many ways. But they also have gynecomastia. So they've like developed breasts. So the question is that person now a new gender because they have this secondary sexual characteristic that doesn't necessarily fit within there? And my answer is only if they identify themselves as a separate gender. Does that make sense?
I think so. It's like you could have certain primary characteristics, but if you have the ones that aren't really associated with the secondary characteristics, it's up to the person who has those primary ones to decide which gender is the correct one for them. Maybe just restate that. I was kind of distracted with the thing. Just say that
I think
again.
that's a good way to say it. And more often than not, that person will identify as male, even though they have gynecomastia. In a lot of cases, they might, seek a doctor to get those removed. So I guess it would be down to them.
Down to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's related to identity, how they identify.
Yeah.
I'm running out of space to define things. Let me see. Okay, one moment. Anything else to describe gender that would help clarify what it is? What do you mean? Well, let's define social construct.
Yeah.
This is not the best way to do this. I'm going to figure this out for next time.
No, it's all right.
All right. Let's define social construct. Yeah.
So if we were to define social construct, it's groupings that it's almost like arbitrary groupings based off of our culture, or as it's based off of like what society thinks would be correct.
Arbitrary cultural construct? Well, we don't want to use the word ideas.
Yeah.
Ideas or values?
I don't know about values. Let's see, arbitrary cultural
concepts.
I would say grouping again. Honestly, concept. There you go. Yep, that's a good concept.
That is what a social construct is. It's an arbitrary cultural concept.
Right.
Okay. What are some other examples of social constructs besides gender?
Let me look that one up, actually.
Sure.
Because I know that there's a pretty easy list, but I can't right off the top of my head. It's like, that's going to be his next question.
Sure.
You know what? So I guess you could say that race is another one. Give me 1 second here. And like I said, I'm not the strongest when it comes to like the cultural side of this.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah, I guess race would be the easiest one for me to kind of be able to talk about. So
okay, and I think one that comes to mind for me is like money. What we assign value to, like paper or gold. Or am I wrong?
I maybe I don't know. I guess I just don't know enough about it to say for sure. But I'm always coming from the school of thought that we can assign value to dollars, but or gold or something like that. But gold is a scarce item, so that's one of the reasons why it's valuable. And then paper money is really it's a check, it's as good as a check, supposedly. So it like you assign a value to it, but then also I don't know, I'm a kind of a believer in market forces and that kind of thing. So I'm not so sure if that's a social construct, but I could say that race would be another good kind of example of social construct, because if we could take, race in general, at what point is someone black and at what point is someone white? That's how do you draw those lines?
Are there any, what do we call non-arbitrary cultural concepts? If a social construct, is that like a different version of a social construct? Or
Um,
are all social constructs arbitrary? What does arbitrary mean? We can define that too.
yeah, yeah. Maybe arbitrary might not fit in there. Give me 1 second. So, all right. So, a definition of arbitrary is based on random choice or personal whim rather than a reason or a system. I suppose you could say that there is a reason and there is a system. So maybe arbitrary is not the correct word there. But the reason why I would use arbitrary is just because gender is kind of based off of sex, and we've kind of like built, as a society, we've built it up as though you're this or you're that for the longest time, because that's what we knew for the longest time. That's what we understood for the longest time. Whereas if we really get down to those secondary sex characteristics and we really start looking at, all right, chromosomes, well, there's a lot of people now that we can karyotype. We're seeing there's people who have XXY chromosomes, and that's Klinefelters. And so these kinds of things crop up. And those, as far as I'm concerned, they're more scientific. So when we're saying that there is a reason or a system, I'm kind of shying towards the science on that one. Whereas the social constructs of gender, they feel very arbitrary to me still.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Does that make no
I think
sense?
so. Yeah. It's a gender is different from sex. It's a social construct, which is an arbitrary cultural concept, and by arbitrary we mean it's like a random choice, personal whim. There's no real reason for it, and okay. How does gender relate to sex? Is it completely disconnected, or how do you think it relates?
I think it relates to sex because it's like a tendency. It's like people who have the sex characteristics that fall more in the male category have these kinds of tendencies. And whether that's true or whether that's not true, we have kind of built our society around that idea. So, you can say, all right, well, men are, or, boys prefer to play with toys that move as opposed to girls prefer to play with, toys that have some type of like social aspect to them. And we can observe that in specific monkeys and also in humans. So, there's those kinds of things that go in there.
What are you
I
calling
might
those
have lost track
categories?
of it.
What are you calling those categories of things, like the boys playing with what are certain toys? Are these like stereotypes of gender? What do we call those things?
Yeah.
You said tendency related to sex. Are these like the tendencies?
I'm thinking tendency is a good word to use because it's maybe instead of tendency, it's like the majority of
Correlations.
a correlation. Correlation's a good word. There's a correlation between sex and your gender and how you would fit in there.
Want to switch it to correlations? It's interesting.
Sure.
Correlations related to sex.
Yep.
All right. And sex related. Some examples of these are What are some again? Some again?
Um, you're looking for. I was talking about boys playing, like younger boys playing with toys that have some type of like motion or action to them, whereas girls tend to play with things that have some type of social aspect to them. Um,
Girls play
with
with
something that has social,
social toys like dolls.
yeah. So yeah, exactly. Something like a doll,
So this is like,
dress ups, that kind of thing. It's not like a hard and fast rule. It's not like boys never play dress up, boys never play with dolls. It's just that if you get 10 of them in a room, then okay, maybe 9 of them do this, and
Okay. Wow. It's amazing how we can just explode so many times
that's a list right there.
from one claim. So gender identity seems to exist.
Mm-hmm.
And gender identity is a sense of one's belonging to a sexual group.
Mm-hmm.
Sexual groups are male and female or other, like non-binary. Male and female, this is a sex. That's what that means. Male and female. Are there any other separate sexes, or are those the only
So
two?
yeah, so one of the rules in there is that sex is a spectrum. And I say that because if we look at the sex characteristics that are listed there, you can kind of like fall anywhere between there. There's two
That's
kind
the
of definitions for sex.
primary characteristics are the spectrum related to sex,
Um,
or is it secondary too?
I would say secondary as well. I would group them all in there, honestly.
All of the sex characteristics, the variety of them, make sex a spectrum.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned cisgender at some point, and what is that again?
So cisgender is basically the opposite of trans. It just means that you identify as the gender that you were assigned at birth, or the sex that you were assigned at birth.
Oh boy, another term. Identify with what you were, what gender or sex?
Yeah, gender or sex. You can use either in this context. You were assigned at birth.
Identify with what gender or sex you were assigned at birth.
Mm-hmm.
Cisgender. It's an identification.
Yeah.
Okay. And should we do transgender? Just to make that clear?
If you want to, okay. Yeah. Just to make it complete.
Yeah. What are some good definitions of that?
So, trans means on the opposite side of, whereas cis means on the same side of. I think that those are what we use in chemistry. I think could be wrong about that, but opposite side of, yeah.
Okay. And transgender is identifying, not identifying?
With identifying, yeah, not identifying, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, that's the primary definition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. So many terms. Assigned at birth. I think that I know what that means. What do you mean by that?
Right. So that's when, if when you come out as a new baby, and then the doctor takes a look at what's between your legs and then determines it's a boy or it's a girl, based off of that.
The genital shape, primary sex characteristic. Is that the primary one that doctors? I assume it's.
That's really the only one that they have to go by, unless the baby's genitals are shaped in some type of different way. They could do ultrasounds in some cases, but it's usually based off of their visual observation at that time.
Yeah, and related to the sex being a spectrum, when they assign sex at birth, they're going off genital shape, but some babies have different chromosomes, which may put them in a different category from, the classic definition of male or female.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What are
We'll talk about it.
Well, yeah, we can talk about what are they called? What are those things called again? I think I know what it is, but like
intersex. Are you talking about?
There's like an acronym for it. S something. Sexual disorder, not disorder.
DSDs. The disorder of sexual development.
Disorder of sexual development.
Right.
Another thing to define. And what are some of these?
Do you want the definition for a DSD, or do you want
let's get
examples of them?
Yeah, let's get the definition and then examples.
Yeah, so the definition itself is probably going to be a little bit more difficult for me to come up with because you could say intersex, but the way that we classify that is a little bit different. So like me, I would classify trans as a disorder of sexual development in a lot of cases, but let's see.
Trans itself is a disorder of sexual development?
That is I have that as a belief that might not be true, and it's probably not what the clinical definition of DSD probably does not say that. Give me 1 second.
Sure. Take your time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. For the definition for DSD, it's a group of rare conditions involving genes, hormones, and reproductive organs, which means that the person's sex development is different to most others.
A group of rare conditions involving genes, hormones, and reproductive organs, which means that a person's sex development is different from most others.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. What are some of the more popular examples of it?
Okay, so Klinefelter's is one example. I'll give you probably 6 of them. That sounds good.
Syndrome? What did you say?
Yeah, Klinefelter's syndrome, and then you can write XXY, and that'll kind of. I'll give you the different chromosomes as we go, so that'll make it easier to keep track of.
Sure.
Let me see. The next one is complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, and that's good. And then we can do congenital adrenal hyperplasia. So then there's some other ones that are.
Is that a different?
Oh yeah. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia is XX.
XX. Okay.
Yeah. These are the main ones that I can really talk on. There are some other ones which I can't remember off the top of my head. We can say, you can go as far as saying polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS. That one's a little bit more common. So it's usually not lumped as a DSD necessarily. So that's another one. And then there's one that's very similar to Klinefelter's, where it's 3 X's. I just forget the name of that one. And then there's another where sometimes some people's they'll be born with their bowels outside of them, or maybe their bladder. But those couple I'm not as familiar with. So I think talking on these ones might be, those 3 examples would probably be good.
Okay. Let me ask some more clarifying questions.
Sure.
For being transgender,
mm-hmm.
I've heard sometimes that anyone can be transgender without it being a disorder of sexual development. There's none of that needs to be in there. It could just be about the correlations related to the sex. It's kind of like tomboy. If a tomboy decided, grew up and decided to be transgender, a trans woman. Is that
Trans man. You're
trans
saying
man?
a
Oh,
tomboy,
trans
so
man.
somebody who's assigned female at birth
Yeah, someone who
would.
is assigned female at birth grows up preferring masculine activities or male related activities, like
Mhm,
boys playing with action toys, and they don't have any DSDs,
mhm,
or they don't have, we haven't defined this yet.
yeah,
What's it called? Gender dysphoria? Is that a thing as
yep.
well? Is that related to transgender? Is that a subset of a disorder of sexual development, or is that something else?
So I mean, we can talk about dysphoria. Dysphoria is just a sense of discomfort with your body.
Yeah.
Yeah, state of. Is that what it said? I didn't see it.
Oh, yeah. Not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can define that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, if that's helpful at all.
Yeah. Transgender people have gender dysphoria.
Hmm. In most cases, personally, I have dysphoria, or I have very very little dysphoria right now, just because I've been transitioned for so long. But the dysphoria is something that does make people trans in a lot of cases, but it's not the one like criteria.
It's not the one necessary criteria. It's just
Right.
one part of the calculation.
Yeah.
And what is it? It's a feeling, or what is it?
Yeah. It's a feeling of distress or unease about your body.
Okay.
And then for gender, it would be specifically for your primary or secondary sex characteristics.
For gender dysphoria, feeling of distress or unease about your primary or secondary sex characteristics. This is just one element potentially of being transgender. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I was talking about a tomboy. Yeah, so now we know that if a tomboy grows up and doesn't have gender dysphoria, they could still identify as a trans man later on without having any of the DSDs or having gender dysphoria.
Right. Correct. Yep. So at the end of the day, it's all an identity thing. But another thing could be gender euphoria, which is pretty much just the opposite of gender dysphoria, where you're instead of being distressed, you're very happy about the state of being having secondary or primary sexual characteristics.
Having gender euphoria. So
Mm-hmm.
if you experience that, or if someone experiences that personally, they might want to just identify with the opposite of whatever they were assigned at birth, so they can just more generally have euphoria. Euphoria seems
Yep.
like a good thing to have.
Right. Yep.
And if that does that for them to do that, um, that's a reason to identify.
Yep. Yep. So basically, some people think that you need gender dysphoria to be trans. Some people think that you don't need dysphoria, but you do need at least euphoria. And then some people think that you don't need either of those. You just need to identify as trans to be trans. I can see where everybody's coming from with those. I experienced dysphoria, so it's a little bit harder for me to wrap my head around the concept that somebody wouldn't experience dysphoria, wouldn't experience euphoria, still would identify as trans, but that still, you still can. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so back to the claim, gender identity seems to exist, and the gender identity, here's the Google, is this the Google definition? An individual's personal sense of having a particular gender,
Mm-hmm.
but you preferred a sense of one's belonging to a sexual group.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a difference between male and female and masculine and feminine?
Um, that is a good question. I think that there is a difference between them, because when we kind of come down to it, we're looking at, to determine whether you're male or female. It comes down to your gametes, and then it also comes down to chromosomes in some cases, mostly more gametes. But let me see. So remind me, can you ask me the question one more time?
Is there just a difference between male and female and masculine and feminine? Are these related to the characteristics, primary or secondary, or are they related to the correlations related to sex?
Right. Yeah. I think there is a difference. I think that sex is a thing, and then masculinity and femininity is also its own thing. It's kind of devoid from that. So I would say masculinity and femininity doesn't have to do necessarily with your sexual characteristics, like your body. It's probably more, revolving around like your gender and your behavior and your mannerisms and that kind of thing.
Is it like the expression of the male gender?
I think that's a good way to put it, as it's kind of like the expression.
The set of expressions, maybe? I'm sure there's a bunch to it.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a bunch of, and we say expressions because, or I could say behaviors that might work.
Behaviors.
I think expressions is even better, because
it's more broad.
We're talking about, like, is something a masculine article of clothing? So that's an expression to me.
Yeah, and these expressions, there's some biological expressions and some cultural expressions?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. Wow. So much.
Is this a bigger board than what you usually get together?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, this is the first time I've had to clarify a term in this way.
It's hard. Before, yeah.
Which I think, if you don't do this and you just start arguing or like debating, like you miss so much nuance and detail and clarity.
Yeah, that's true. So is it helpful so far?
I think so.
Great.
So now so we're using mainly this definition of gender identity, a sense of one's belonging to a sexual group. What does that mean to exist?
Or you're saying to exist?
People,
or
are we saying like people have a sense of one's belonging to a sexual group?
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
That's just a thing in the claim exists. Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you mean by exist in this claim?
Yeah. Exist being, it seems to be a measurable phenomenon. Does that work for exist?
Yeah, that's fine. A measurable phenomenon of people's sense.
Mm-hmm. So like, think about it this way: is like gravity seems to exist.
Yeah.
So gender identity. We say that gravity seems to exist because it's so observable. Gender seems to be a very observable thing.
Gender seems to be an observable thing because of all the correlations.
Because of the correlations, I'll also go as far as to say that there's a lot of study for gravity, right? So there's a lot of calculations and that kind of thing that we can do. There's also a lot of study for gender identity so far. So like Ken Zucker had done a lot of work with younger gender dysphoric kids, and so he has kind of determined that people have a sense of their gender by about 5 years of age in most cases. So there's studies out there that show that this is it's something that we've seen over and over. If you ask a 5-year-old, are you a girl or are you a boy, they can usually tell you. We're not sure if that's cultural based or if it's not, because we don't have any kids in a vacuum. But their sense of themselves seems to be, they seem to be able to answer it at that point.
That's a way to observe and measure the phenomenon of gender identity, polling kids or whoever. You just ask people what their gender identity is and they give an answer, and that's a way to measure the phenomenon of gender identity.
Yeah, so they'll be able to give an answer. It's observable that, let's say at 3 years of age, they might not know if you ask them that question, but there's a specific point where they kind of pick it up, and that's if we're talking about kids. So there's like that developmental aspect, but then there's also the sense of yourself being able to like fit within a group.
Mm-hmm. Is that is this the main reason to think that gender identity seems to exist, because gender identity is an objectively measurable phenomenon?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Want to just get a bunch of reasons on the board besides this, or is this the only one, or what are some of the reasons to give someone confidence about this claim?
That's the core one. If you were to say, hey, what's your best reason? I think that's it. So there might not be a reason to look at other ones. If you can, destroy that one for me, I would probably have to take a step back and rethink the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all about how we define gender identity, a sense of one's belonging to a sexual group. A sense of one's belonging to a sexual group. And the sexual groups are male and female and other non-binary. A sense of one's belonging. Belonging. Is there any... I don't know if... Let me think. Yeah, so this is the main reason. Why? I don't know what else to do. If this is just the identity, and the main reason is objectively measurable. What's the best evidence that it's objectively measurable? Just people can do it themselves. People can ask themselves, what is my gender identity? What do I feel? What does it mean to ask yourself, the question, do I have a gender identity? Do some people not have any gender identity? Do some people have it even more than most?
So some people seem to, because you can ask, varieties of people, and some of them may give you the answer of, I don't know what my gender identity is. And so that maybe because they genuinely don't know and can't tell and are just going with whatever body and they have, or it could be that their sense of their sense of that gender is just kind of like flowing naturally, so maybe they don't have to really stop and question it. So that's for some people who are cisgender. On the flip side is there's this thing, gender identity, which someone may say, like, I'm assigned male at birth, I identify as male, and I fit within that cultural role, and just everything just goes with them. We can also observe that there are trans people that don't fit within those categories. And so, like myself, I was assigned male at birth, but I'm coming forward saying that doesn't really work for me. I have this sense of dysphoria. So I feel as though my gender identity is the opposite of that. Does that answer your question at all?
Yeah.
That might be more of a ramble. we can also look at the people who are intersex. And so this might be a good place to look at that. If we take complete androgen insensitivity syndrome as an example, which it's abbreviated CAIS in a lot of cases. For people who are complete androgen insensitive, the way it works is their gametes are small gametes, which means that they are male gametes, if there is such a thing. Their chromosomes are XY, which means that they are traditionally male chromosomes, if there is such a thing. But when they're born and then the doctor holds them up, the doctor always goes, it's a girl, because their genitals are shaped on the outside exactly like what we would expect from a girl. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Are you following me?
the classic chromosomes is XX is female, XY is male, but complete androgen insensitivity syndrome comes out with the genital shape, of a female, but is actually XY. They have the opposite chromosomes of what you expect from the genital shape. Okay.
And so the word complete androgen insensitivity is basically saying that the cells in this person's body can't take androgens. They can't use testosterone of any type. So because of that, they didn't get like the masculinization that most boys or males would experience to be able to, put forward as a male, to look like a male according to society, to look like a male according to our characteristics, our secondary and primary characteristics that we use to define them. For all intents and purposes, this person will look like they're female. They won't have male secondary sex characteristics because any of the testosterone that is in them is just not, their body just can't take it. It's just not connecting with the, which I believe is connecting with the ligands, but basically the receptors just aren't picking it up.
Yeah, so the fetal development process for humans that splits them into like a sex has to do with the hormones that is released during that development, and sometimes, I don't know what to say, fetuses with XY chromosomes at that time when the hormones are supposed to, if they're XY, classically male, that would trigger some type of testosterone thing happening. But when they have this insensitivity syndrome, that doesn't happen, so they just keep developing as if they are female, XY, or XX, as even though they have XY. There's just a disorder of sexual development happening.
Yeah, that's a good summary of it.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, if you were to, and I believe they usually find this with ultrasound, this is usually somebody who's completely androgen insensitive. They usually won't find out about it until they're in their late teenage years because they don't have menstruation. And so just to kind of get that checked out. And then usually what will happen is they'll find that, okay, they actually have testes. So they have the gametes are small gametes. So they're male. And then the way to check after that, of course, is to do a karyotype test. And then if that comes back XY, then that's pretty telling of what's going on. So, you have this person who, if we go back to like grassroots of, if we just boil all of this stuff down, right? We take that sex characteristics box and we say, I don't care how your breasts develop. I don't care what your body hair is. I don't care how your voice sounds. I don't care about any of this stuff. It's all gametes and only gametes. A lot of people who have complete androgen insensitivity syndrome are very feminine. They identify female. They don't always, but in a lot of cases, they identify as females.
Oh, even not all people who have CAIS identify as women. Like what
And
percent?
not all of them, but most of them tend to. I don't think that there's a study directly on that, but that's like anecdotal, things.
Okay,
Most of the time they identify as female.
gotcha. Cool.
And I think I bring that up because when we're talking about gender identity, can you flip back over to the other chart?
Yeah.
Let's see. Gender identity is an objective, measurable phenomenon. I think that that's a good example of, in addition to what I said about Ken Zucker, people with, and specifically congenital adrenal, complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. They don't always identify with what their chromosomes are supposed to be. They don't always identify with what their gametes are. So how are they like fitting in the world is the question.
They examine how they fit in the world by trying to sense their own gender identity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, people with CAIS, female assigned to birth with XY. What is the right way to say this? Is as a reason to think that gender identity is an objectively measurable phenomenon. They sense. They say they have a gender identity, or they just all human. Well,
Right.
yeah.
Even though the gametes don't match, most of them, 9 times out of 10, are saying, "Hey, I'm female."
Yeah, most people with CAIS, I have a masculine. No, is it male? No, it's female assigned to birth, right?
Yep,
Yeah,
they're assigned female at birth. Yep.
Yeah, they have a. It's not. Yeah, they have a female gender identity,
Yes.
even though it's XY chromosomes, which it would go again. Yeah, if we defined gender strictly, that would go against that potentially.
And it's even deeper than that, I would say, because we're talking about XY chromosomes. So a lot of people want to take it back to chromosomes, and I think that even a step further back is taking it to gametes. So this person has male gametes. They still don't identify as males most of the time.
Yeah, like a reason against this, some would say would be like people don't have the power to identify their gender at all. It's like biologically determined for them, and they have no choice.
Right. Yep. That's usually what I hear. So that's the
People don't have a choice for their gender. People would say that would be a reason against for identifying with their gender.
right. I'm trying to think. Another kind of con that I hear is that, let's see, people don't have a choice. It's more that I guess people can't have a gender identity. I don't know. I had a thought, I lost it.
Yeah. Some people would say people don't have a choice to identify with anything other than their. What's the adjective for that gender? Biological gender?
Mm-hmm.
Well, is that what they would say?
Yeah, sure. Yep, they're biological. Mm-hmm.
Biologically determined gender.
Yeah.
Or would it gender? Yeah. Okay.
I think you could interchange gender or sex there.
Yeah, either. I assume they would conflate the two, or just.
Yeah. I think that people, a lot of times it does get conflated, but I think that you and I are kind of on the same page, so I don't think that it would matter very much.
Mm-hmm. And a reason people don't have a choice to identify with anything other than their biologically determined gender, and a reason against this is because gender identity is an objectively measurable phenomenon. I can link that there. That's a reason against it. Because people, well, a reason against it, what would you just say as a reason against that? If it's not gender identity is an objectively measurable phenomenon.
All right, so help me to understand. This is on the con side. It's saying,
if someone says
gender seems to exist. Okay.
Yeah, if someone says people don't have a choice to identify with anything other than their biologically determined gender, what would you say against that? I assume you would be against that. Mm-hmm. What's a reason against it?
I guess the reason against it would be that people, okay, so we already have one in there right now, right? So this gender identity is an objectively measurable phenomenon.
Yeah. What is the
I guess it would be that the whatever your biological sex is really doesn't seem to have a bearing on what your gender identity is. Biological sex is not determined. Okay.
Does not necessarily.
Right. Or you could say always, or
determine someone's biological sex does not necessarily determine someone's gender.
Right. Does that work?
Yeah.
Great.
Because someone's gender is determined by their gender identity. Is that the reason for that?
Maybe is it, or are we looking for someone's gender is not determined by their their sex characteristics? I'm just trying to understand why you're putting someone's gender is not determined by their gender identity.
Is determined by their gender identity. It's a reason to believe.
Okay, yes.
A reason to believe that biological sex does not necessarily determine someone's gender is because someone's gender is determined by their gender identity.
Okay, yes.
Is that what you would say? Is that what?
That is what I would say, definitely. Yeah. Someone's gender seems to be determined. I would still put a seems in there because not 100% sure. It's not. So that's the problem with this kind of stuff is it doesn't. I can't say that it's 100% concrete because we're still not sure at the end of the day what is causing somebody with complete androgen insensitivity syndrome to say I'm a female in most cases. So we have hints as to why it is. We have maybe inklings as to why that's the case, but we don't know for sure. So I would still put seems in there.
The CAIS people, I don't know the details. What shape of, what is it? What genital shape do they have usually? Yeah,
they have vaginas. So you can they would have vaginas on surface level, and then if a doctor goes in to give them a pap smear, that's another time when they might find it, because they would go in and then find that there's no uterus. So it's shallow. As far as I understand, the expert on this one, but also instead of ovaries, they tend to have testes, because that's what's there when they're a fetus. But and that just kind of carries forward, but they're undescended and they never descend. So
They have
they don't have a space
they
to
have
descend
a
either.
shallow vagina with undescended testes.
Right.
All right.
And you can't tell by looking. There's nothing that you can do by visual observation to figure out that's the case.
Yeah, on the surface, it's like indistinguishable.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so we've gone back up to the top.
Yeah, now we're back to the top. What other reasons against this idea have you heard besides people don't have a choice to identify?
Let me think about that for a second. And these are things against the statement of gender identity seems to exist. Already we have people don't have a choice to identify with anything other than their biological gender. I guess the other con would be like gender, because it is purely social, gender identity isn't a phenomenon beyond social. Does that make sense? Like I think that there is some way that my brain is wired. It's not necessarily that my brain has to be wired in a specific way, but like there's something about me that is saying, okay, you're female. And I have a sense of self in that regard. And I guess some people who would say that gender identity is not a thing are saying that that is pure socialization or pure cultural. And so it kind of like takes it away from the biological roots that we have there, where once again most males are masculine and these kinds of things, whereas yeah, see, I guess that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Is this the best way to say that? A reason against, some people would say, was gender identity is nothing more than the result of socialization.
Yes. It's like it's some people would say that it's purely conceptual and that there is nothing that is observable beyond that.
Yeah, people would say it's purely conceptual. It's all cultural based. It's all the social constructs there happening. What's the reason against this idea? It's nothing, that it's not more than, that it's not purely the result of socialization. The reason against it has to do with something related to biology.
Yeah, the first off, one of them again is the realizations of younger kids realizing that they have a gender identity, or there is a point where they can still communicate with you, but they can't really answer that question. And then there is a certain point where it's like something like a switch flips, and now they can answer that question for you.
Many young children realize that they have a gender identity that's different from what they were assigned at birth.
Mm-hmm. We say like some.
Yep. Some just.
Yep.
All right.
And that's not necessarily what I was saying. I think I was more saying that if the control groups of kids are saying, yes, I know that I'm a boy, or yes, I know that I'm a girl, and there's a certain time when that starts. So those control groups, like people who are, someone who's assigned male at birth, gets up to 5 years of age, says, yes, I'm a boy, that's your control group in that study, basically. And the controls all knew at a specific point.
Okay.
I don't know how to.
I may be confused. How does this fact that some young children realize they have a gender identity that's different from what they were assigned at birth with relate to this being the case, that gender identity is more than the result of socialization? That this is a reason against to believe that? If this is true, that's a reason to not believe that that's the case?
Yeah. I guess it would be one of the reasons, because it's, like I said, because it is such a like flip of a switch kind of thing where they have those realizations. There are other like brain mapping, switch flipping when it comes to kids. So do you know about like aquatic babies and water babies? You know about this?
I've heard, of that as a thing, yeah.
There's a specific age, and I might be wrong about this, but I think it's 9 months. If you take a kid up to 9 months and you drop them into water, they'll automatically or reflexively hold their breath, which might be like a carryover from having births in like watery areas and that kind of thing. But it seems like that is very much a flip of a switch that happens in their brains, where they go, oh, I got it. When they turn, let's say 10 months, if I have that number right, once they turn 10 months, they go, uh-oh, I'm in a pool, I'm drowning, and they flip out, and they might inhale the water and this kind of thing. So
that's an analogy you're saying?
Yeah. That's an analogy. That's one example. I just had another example that would kind of also fit in there, but I forgot it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I want to make it clear. What I'm hearing you say is that the socialization increases as you age, and young children are less likely to be socialized into a gender identity that's different from what they were assigned at birth, like because they're not that old. They just haven't had the chance to have a lot of socialization. Is that what you're saying?
So that's not what I'm saying, but that is a very good, point kind of mixed in there. That's not directly what I'm saying.
So what were you saying? I completely lost it.
It's all right. Is it that I'm realizing that maybe this isn't, the best reason against, but it's just the first one that came to my head.
Sure. We can move reasons around to different claims. That's another great thing that Gala can do.
Mm-hmm. Let me see. So
it would have to be something about biology causing people to have gender identity, or like what's the opposite of socialization?
Yeah.
Biology.
Right. Exactly. That's it. That's pretty much it. Is that there is something biological instead of something socializing that causes that switch to happen. And like I said, an analogy of that is going to be when you have 9 months old in a pool of water versus after that. I thought of the other example, actually.
Okay.
There is a center of the brain that when it grows, babies actually see the world upside down up until a specific point, and then they see the world in the right side up. And the way that we know that is because your eyes, as they are right now, you have a center in your brain that is flipping the image. We know because of the way that concave and convex lenses work, that the image that you're seeing in front of you is actually upside down, and your brain has to 180 that.
Remember that scene from Wild Wild West? Do you remember that scene? Where they have
I never saw that.
They have like a severed head, and it's like a goofy movie, but they like try to severed head, and they cut a hole in the back and try to put light through their eyes, and the image on the screen is upside down, and then they have to, it's a joke, but then they have to turn the head.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That is a man's head.
And keep going about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's really the whole thing, is that here's two examples of your brain develops to a certain point and then something clicks on. And it seems like gender is another one of these things where you get to 5 years of age and it clicks on and you're just aware of what your gender is, whether there's other things that also go along with that. So like if you're aware of what your, if it's more of like the kid being aware of their self, that there's some evidence that I could point out for that as well. But that might be kind of getting into the weeds of it.
What I'm hearing you say is people's gender identity develops over time. That's another fact. That is true.
Right. That's something that seems to be observable.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the main claim about this is that what is it? There are some biological factors related to gender identity, to to people having a gender identity, or just to people having a gender identity, their gender identity. What's the best way to say that?
Yeah. I think that's the perfect way of saying it, but there's going to be some trans people who are mad at me for saying that. This is
oh, really?
When you say that there's biological factors that are involved in there, then that pins me as a trans medicalist. Are you familiar with this?
Trans medicalist?
With a trans medicalist,
what
yes.
What is that about?
So, yeah. So there are groups of trans people and also some physicians and these kinds of things that believe that trans has something to do with these biological mechanisms. And some of them will like declaratively say it's all hormones, and that there are like centers in your brain and you either have them or you don't. And I don't think that we know enough to say that for sure right now. So that's the only reason why I don't really ascribe to that. And yeah, so the word for it is trans medicalists. And yeah, so some people would be upset if I just say, yeah, that's the case. It's not necessarily the case, but that's at least maybe in my case, or in we could say in some cases, biological factors relate to having a gender identity.
In some cases.
Yep.
We'll just qualify that. In some cases, there are some biological factors related to people having a gender identity. And the trans medicalist would say, no, why? What's their main reason why?
No, a trans medicalist would say yes.
Oh, they would say yes.
There is a biological factor.
And what is the term for not trans medicalist?
For a non-trans medicalist, I think it's a truce. These are like the internet acronyms, right? But have you heard of the term true scum before?
True
you ever heard of that?
I've heard of that, but I don't. That's another definition I need.
There's too cute, and then there's a true scum. So true scum is somebody who is a trans medicalist, and then a too cute is somebody who doesn't care about the trans medicalism side and just says, I am the gender that I say that I am because I say that I am. And that's pretty much all I'm working with anyway. So
a too cute says I am the gender I am because I say so?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like TOO, cute?
I believe it's TUCUTE. Yeah.
TUCUTE. What is that? A French word? What is that? Is that like a? What is that? How did that come about?
So I wish that I could tell you that one. The Truscum is actually, it's Truscum, so they don't have an E on the end of that.
Oh.
And so maybe somebody was like riffing off of that,
and
that's how that developed.
Is it Trucute? True cute? Or like true
No,
scum?
I think it's just TU.
Just TU.
CUT.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's true scum and too cute.
Could be wrong about that, but
Let me Google too cute.
yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Someone who believes that gender dysphoria is not necessary to be transgender.
Mm-hmm.
Too cute.
Right. So gender dysphoria is often like medicalized.
Oh, it means too cute to be cis.
Right.
Okay.
Which is to say, I guess, that you are too cute to be like normal or something. Couldn't tell you that one. I wish that I could, but that's just how we say it.
That's just a label for people who would say no. It's not the case that in some cases there are some biological factors related to people having a gender identity. Why would they be against? What's their reason against that?
Their main reason against that is because they don't want to medicalize, they don't want to pathologize trans as a thing. Because and think about it this way, right? So I take hormones. I've been taking hormones for 6 years, and I've had some surgeries and these types of things. And let's just say, as a hypothetical, they find the spot in the brain that controls gender. They found it. Hooray! Here it is. Everybody who's trans just goes in to get their brain scanned, and pretty much all of them come out with a yes, but Kiwi comes back and it says no. It says, nope, sorry, Kiwi, you're a man. What do you do at that point? You know, so that's one of the reasons for, for not saying 100% yes, it's medical. The other reason, and I think that this is an even bigger reason that's on a lot of people's subconscious, maybe they're just not bringing it forward, but what we know about endocrinology, what we know about science right now is just not robust enough to really know this stuff. So just recently, there's a doctor, and he's my doctor, who has found that a lot of transgender women have this problem. He calls it the estrone problem. And what's happening is when we take our hormones, we're actually metabolizing it in a very strange way. And all of the studies that have been done on hormones they've been performed on cisgender women. So it wasn't even like a thing. So he's been, giving people, here's this estrogen, not just him, but also all other medical professionals. Here's this tablet estrogen, swallow this. And what's happening is it's metabolizing in a weird way, not for all of us, but for some of us. And if you take it in a different way, instead of it as a pill, I do injections. If you take it as an injection, it'll metabolize because it won't have to go through your liver. So it metabolizes in this different way and it's more effective that way. But it's something that they didn't catch for the longest time, because we just didn't know enough, like I said, about endocrinology, about the science. So it's happening so widely that this is something that affects about half of transgender women. But we didn't know anything about it. And for years, anecdotally, we've been saying shots are better. We don't know why, but these shots are working better. I feel better on them, and they make me look more female when I'm taking shots as opposed to swallows. And for the longest time, it's been, doctors have been saying there's no difference. There's no difference. Be quiet. We're not giving you shots. Take the pills. Is that helpful?
Yeah. So it seems like if we care about the well-being of trans people, we should medicalize, potentially gender identity and the phenomenon of trans people in order to help them, get stuff like that happening.
That is a very strong belief that I have. We should investigate this stuff as much as possible for our well-being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable. All right. Any other reasons against this claim that in some cases there are some biological factors related to people having a gender identity, or reasons for it? What are those biological factors?
In some cases, there are some biological factors related to people having gender identity. I guess the biological factors are they once again they seem to be hormones.
Hormone level, or just
Yep.
what's the way to, hormone level as a biological factor?
Yep.
Biological.
And I can give you the example of the other two intersex conditions kind of fit in with this well, if that'd be helpful.
Probably don't need to go into that detail. Hormone level is a biological factor that influences how people identify with their gender.
Mm-hmm.
Hormone level. Any other main ones besides hormone level? Biological factors?
For biological factors, that's the main one that I look at.
Anything related to the brain?
I really think that that's the only one, because if we were to say your brain, then it would be affected by your like your brain is affected by hormones. So I would think that you could basically extrapolate that that if your brain is doing something a little bit different, then it's probably based on hormones, based on the fact that, okay, complete androgen insensitivity syndrome person does not have any testosterone in them. They identify as female most often. Is it the presence or absence of testosterone that's doing that? Probably. In all other cases,
Yeah, we'd have to control for that in some way and see if some people, there would just be a whole control thing to go into that.
Yeah. And I would say hormone because when I say testosterone, that's not the only androgen. You could have low testosterone and then have high dihydrotestosterone, and we wouldn't even know to check for that necessarily in some cases, which that can also affect your brain.
Okay. Anything else about gender identity seems to exist because gender identity is an objectively measurable phenomenon, and we've got reasons against it, but then we countered them as well. We countered those. Is there any reasons against this reason? Gender identity is an objectively measurable phenomenon. Is there a reason against that being the case?
You could still say that for the child studies with Ken Zucker, you could say that that still, like them realizing that they have a gender identity is caused by socialization. You could say that somebody who has complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, or CAIS. You could say, well, they lived their whole life not even knowing that they were another gender. So clearly, it is a societal thing. You could kind of point to those couple of examples.
Gotcha.
So I think that's a good one. Gender identity is more of a result of socialization. That summarizes both of those pretty well.
Yeah. Alrighty. Any other main reasons for or against that we've missed, or these are the main ones?
those are good. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've gone quite a while.
Yeah.
It took a
What
while to get everything clarified.
Yeah.
That was super helpful. I don't know if people are going to watch past that point, but that's fine. But this is great for me. I just like to hear people out and understand where they're coming from. And this was great. Loved it. Any other feedback? Any questions for me?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate you, going over it with me and also mapping it out. That was great. So
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
um,
I'm gonna have to figure out a better way to do this. I'll figure it out though.
yeah.
It should be fun. And we didn't even get to the other claims, so maybe we can, feel free to schedule another conversation anytime, and we can get to some of those claims.
Sure. Yeah. If you're interested in any of the other ones, let me know. We can definitely talk about those.
I am for sure. Yeah, feel free to use the Calendly link.
Okay.
Those are the times I'm available. It links to my other calendar, and times don't show up unless I'm free. So that's how it works.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha. Awesome. 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 Awesome.
All right.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you going over it with me, and thanks for your time, and thanks for mapping it out. That was great.
Sure thing. No problem. Yeah. Thanks, Kiwi, and see you on the Discord. Talk soon.
All right. Take care.